It's Monday, March 10th. You're listening to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Daredevil is back after taking a 7-year hiatus, sabbatical, whatever you want to call it, to complete his BA. The first 2 episodes of Born Again dropped March 4th on Disney+. Each is close to an hour long, despite the title of the first episode being Heaven's Half Hour. Episode 2 is called Optics. There's been a lot of hype, rumor, speculation since the original Netflix series was forced into an abrupt ending. Do you have anything to say about that before we continue?
I think that the first and third season were great, and I thought that the second season after episode 4 was a drop in quality.
Yeah, you were not a fan of The Punisher. In fact, I think that was, what did you say?
But The Punisher was the only good part of season 2. I'm talking about everything actually after The Punisher, because he wasn't even the villain. It was the Yakuza.
What did you think of The Punisher series?
I thought that the first season was good, and I didn't bother watching the second season.
Well, they've got one of the main producers, one of the main writers from that coming over and doing the show running here.
Well, yeah, because John Bernthal is going to be, I think, showing up.
That's not the reason they got the showrunner, but they brought him over, I think, after the writer's strike and after there was a switch up. Let's get into that. So originally, there were a lot of clouds to this series. People didn't know what to expect. It was pitched as a legal procedural, and it was going to reinvent Matt Murdock from scratch, even though it still starred Charlie Cox.
Right, because no other character aside from Thanos has been teased as much as Daredevil. I mean, you had Fisk picture and Hawkeye, and then literally 2 days later, you have Daredevil showing up in No Way Home. Then Fisk ends up showing up in Hawkeye. Then then Daredevil shows up in She-Hulk and Echo. And then, but then I was also skeptical because they had to get rid of 7 scripts or something, right?
They wanted to appeal to a younger audience to start with. So Charlie Cox knew he would return, but thought he was going to play a completely different role. They said, we're going to have 18 episodes in this first season. That's a big swallow.
That's even more than The Pit.
That's insane that they would try to do that, especially for Marvel, since what was WandaVision 6 episodes?
WandaVision, I think, was 9 episodes, but I think Echo was 5.
Yes, it just got smaller and smaller, and then this show came in there, and we're going to undo it all. September 2023, though, shit hit the fan. D'Onofrio, Cox, they both talked to Feige directly. Feige or Feige, whatever, the guy who controls it all. And they said, this isn't working. We don't like where our characters are going. They weren't the only ones. I think the network itself watched the episodes and said, why is Daredevil not in costume? Why is this moving so slow? And so they did a creative overhaul. And they brought in Dario Scardapane, who is the guy I was talking about, the Punisher dude. And he is now serving as showrunner. And he came in and he was like, yeah, we're going to make it dark again. We're going to keep a lot of the Netflix stuff, still get rid of a lot of the Netflix stuff. We're not going to take any of the season 4 plans that they originally had.
Right, because I think it was supposed to go 5 seasons, and season 4 was supposed to be a different villain, and I believe season 5 was supposed to be then Daredevil versus Fisk again.
You know more than I do, but I felt as if when I heard that the showrunners had been replaced that late into 2023, that this series was bound to fail.
Yes, I thought so too.
That was a really, really bad sign. But in a way, I think it's cool that Cox and D'Onofrio were standing up for the rights to the characters that they felt that they embodied.
And I mean, Charlie Cox has always been a big fan of Daredevil. I remember when there was petitions to try and save it, he was kind of like the front man. He very much wanted to play the role again.
But it reminded me a lot of what happened to the Superman franchise. And with Cavill, who's a huge, also the Witcher franchise, where he's a big fan of these characters. He wants to make them their own, but also he has a problem with the creativity going in a direction he doesn't like if he feels like it's not true to the character, right? And so he got replaced. Charlie Cox didn't get replaced, so he won. But okay, so they did ditch a few of the Netflix things. They brought back Karen and Foggy, at least for a little bit. And then instead of making it like a noir in Hell's Kitchen, we don't really see Hell's Kitchen in these 2 episodes. It's more just a New York crime story, and there's less brooding. I think the way that Scardapane said it was less navel gazing, which I had to look up that term. Do you know what navel gazing?
I don't know what it means.
Think of when a human looks down at their own belly button, they're kind of I guess, looking in on themselves. And there's going to be less of that. Again, the brooding part of it, still dark though. And we jump into the first episode and they're at a bar celebrating this new cop's retirement, Sherry. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think he was from the first seasons, right?
I didn't remember if he was or not. But Foggy, Karen, and Matt, they're all there. It seems like they're having a good time.
Yeah, and we know Fisk is still going to show up later on. There's been rumors that possibly the Punisher is going to be showing up. But what I didn't know was that Poindexter was going to pop up in
And
like the first scene.
so my question was, they if you had subtitles on, it said Bullseye. Was he referred to as Bullseye? I know that's who he was playing in the show, but I don't remember any character actually referring to him as that. I remember them calling him Poindexter, so I couldn't tell if that was a change or not.
I don't recall either, but I'm not surprised that because it's been a certain amount of time.
Right.
That's one of the things they addressed there. It's been what, 7 years, maybe 10 years for them. And they have their own firm together. Things seem to be going pretty well. The city isn't perfect, but that's when Daredevil's called away because one of the witnesses is in trouble. And as he gets closer to where Foggy is keeping them, which was at his apartment, he figures out that the person who was looking for Foggy is actually, or sorry, the person was not looking for the witness, but was looking for Foggy. So he has to hightail it back to the bar. But by then, Poindexter is there. And what's he do?
Fresh off back surgery, he shoots Foggy and then he blows up the bar.
Okay, because he fell off in the
Yeah.
third season, right? That's why he
Yeah,
threw
no,
it
but
back.
even the third season cliffhanger, if you remember,
I
that
don't.
it ended with him. He was getting back surgery because I think he was paralyzed due to the fight with Fisk.
So it's like Bane. Like
Yeah.
this was a whole Bane. Okay. So one thing that we should be aware of for this season is they also reduced the number of episodes. They no longer were going to do 18. Now it's going to be 9 this season and then 8 next season. Phase 5, we're at the tail end of that, right?
Yeah.
And the next season's coming out in phase 6.
And I think that that's supposed to be the end. Like, I think it was phase 1 to phase 3 was something like the Infinity Saga. I think phase 6 is supposed to be the end of a saga, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So.
Well, you said originally that they were supposed to have who was the linchpin of the entire multiverse thing that they had to get rid of.
Kang.
Yeah,
That was
Kang.
originally, yeah.
And so now they've had to like rework things, and then there was the writer's strike and
Yeah.
just the pandemic and all that stuff. So I guess this is kind of a return to form in a way, but it's also born again. So it's staying true to the title. Did you like Foggy's death?
Yeah, I like the whole first scene. I even understood, even though I had it listed a little bit as a con, why they decided to keep Poindexter alive. Again, they ended him with a big cliffhanger, so it would be a little weird to kill him off in the opening. However, I thought that it was very effective. I especially like the shot that leads into the intro. It does this cool transition where you see Charlie Cox, he's in uniform. They tried to get the one-shot fight scene out of the
Yes.
way early, which is interesting because, and it might have just been a pattern, but if you remember, there was the one-shot fight scene in episode 2 of season 1, the one-shot fight scene in season 2 of episode 3.
Was that the prison? Which was the prison?
The prison was season 3, episode 4.
Okay, that's the one I remember. Really.
So I'm pretty sure if there was a one-shot fight scene that was going to happen in season 4, it was going to be episode 5, just to keep that pattern. But yeah, they got it out of the way, but he.
So do you think they were paying homage to that, or do you think that they were just trying to make
I
it
think
really
that's
cool?
I think that's exactly what they were doing, paying homage to it. But also the shot that I like so much is when Daredevil drops his mask, and then it kind of does the big sweeping shot, and then we go into the intro, and they keep the song. Thank you for keeping the song. I really like the song.
So the song's the same. The intro's a little different. It's no longer red. It's more like crusty. Justice is falling apart in front of him because they have a new mayor, and the new mayor is going to be Wilson Fisk, and that just is audacious and crazy. I don't know if audacious is the right word. But Karen, she's impacted. People were pointing out that when she saw Foggy die, that was one thing. When she heard the fall behind her, the way they shot it made it seem like she thought it was going to be Daredevil, that it was going to be Matt. And so that people were very complimentary of her acting there. I personally didn't like the way that the way that the MCU has brought in Daredevil and kind of changed the way he fights. They gave him more agility, and they also made him like super speedy. And in Echo, it worked. In the first scene here, it felt like I was watching like a production. Like there was a point where they were in the bar where I could have sworn I wouldn't have been surprised if they yelled cut and we suddenly were in the franchise series and like you could see the set parts moving and stuff like that. That's why it felt very setty to me in that scene. Now you jump over to episode 2 at the end there, and that fight scene felt a lot better. So I can say like it started off on kind of a wishy-washy note for me, but by the end I was sold.
There was a moment where I wasn't a big fan of him jumping around rooftops because I know he does that in the original series, but it seemed like he was a lot more Spider-Man-y this time around. Yeah, and there was
he has the Batman.
There was even a part where I wasn't surprised if it was AI because he does there was like a weird jump or like
he has
a
the
weird
rope.
cut.
Yes, he has the batarang or whatever.
and also I will say that Foggy for being such a main character in the show, his death was kind of obvious. You knew that Disney was going to start off making it dark because they want to be like, no, we can do violence as well. I mean, literally in their trailer, they're billing this thing as being TVMA. And so I could kind of tell that even before Foggy did get shot, that he was going to be, he was going to
I
die.
don't know why, but it was predictable. But at the same time, it felt so unnecessary then. Like, had they kind of worked it up and made it seem like this is what we've been building towards, we're running this great firm, made it seem like they were on an arc to all hang out together for the rest of the series like they did in the first three,
Right.
then kill him, then I feel like it would have hit home. But we've developed Foggy's character through 3 seasons. He was not my favorite. However, I do believe that there was a big fandom who was like appreciative towards him. And you could have made that death, I think, a lot more momentous for his character. Instead, what you did was you set up Matt Murdock's character to kind of have his own personal path, as opposed to he's gotten rid of Karen because he kind of like rebuffed her, and then when she finally came back a year later, she doesn't want to have anything to do with him quite yet. And but I think she'll return later on in the series.
I assume so. Yeah, I don't think that she's only going to be in the pilot. I
They've
think
also
her character was supposed to be in like all of the in Netflix shows, right?
it felt like they build it in the ads for it. There was him and Foggy and Karen all in the picture, right? I can distinctly remember there's like one where they're all sitting together and just like hanging out. And it just feels like such a false take to kill him off so quickly. There have been hints that he may return later on in some form, probably
Like as
a
a ghost, yeah.
speaking to him and giving him a pep talk.
I don't really want that
A
though.
backflash, possibly, something. There's a reason they didn't include the intro before the entire thing started, and that's because you can see his grave in it, and it's falling apart. So that would have given something away. So Matt Murdock, we jump a year in the future. Wilson Fisk is running for mayor. He's doing very well. Matt Murdock is set up on a date. He's got Cherry working for him, sort of like Mike from Breaking Bad. It's like an ex-detective who is now just a PI for him.
Yeah.
And he's hung up the Daredevil costume once again. Because why? Why do you think that is? Just because he doesn't want?
I think he's just distancing himself from it,
from
especially
vigilantism.
because I think he feels like had he never become Daredevil, and this is something that I thought they overdid in the Netflix series, so I wasn't too happy to see it here. But I thought that because he entered that life, other people had to pay for it.
I think
hence
that's
Foggy.
the navel gazing that he's talking about, where
Yeah.
like he's overthinking it a little bit, but you still get it. I mean, it's a darkness inside
Right.
of him, and even Fisk calls it like his dark passenger or something, your other half. Um, so that was where Fisk is, and eventually there's a meetup between Fisk and Matt Murdock where he's invited Fisk to have lunch with him.
Yeah, that
right?
was like kind of near the end of the first episode. What did you think of that? What did you think of that scene where they're talking to each other?
Well, on my pros, I think that certain scenes hit very well. The second episode, last scene, which we'll get to, my favorite scene, the the actual diner scene was also my second favorite scene, because I think not having them punch each other, I think the conversation was good dialogue. There was a lot of feeling each other out, a lot of whether or not he was going to trust Fisk as a new man, so to speak. And we, as an audience, kind of fall into Matt's camp, where we know for sure that this guy is going to turn evil some point if he isn't already just manipulating everything. When you saw Echo, though, it's kind of funny because he was like a different type of character than he was in the original Daredevil. This feels like a more connected Fisk to the Netflix
Right.
series.
So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that because what I liked so much about the diner scene, it was one of my favorite too, is that this show seems focused on Murdock and the Fisk rivalry. If anything is indication of that, it's like the very last shot where you see Fisk and then Daredevil. There's not going to be another villain like they were planning for season 4. This is going to be between them. And
There will be other villains.
Yes, but I'm saying that like it seems like at least for the first 2 episodes, they are going to be like the main like
that will be the overall
yes.
arching theme to this, especially once it's found out that Fisk wins.
And I was so glad also that, yes, like you said, when Fisk shows up in Hawkeye, I was not a big fan. Echo, I thought he had some scenes that kind of reminded me of Daredevil, but I still didn't really see the same character. But I think that Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio...
Charlie Cox brings out the real...
Yeah, no, I feel like
okay.
This Daredevil Born Again, they were able to bring it back. Like these two characters, it's almost like they didn't skip a beat, I thought.
I also liked, as far as my pros are concerned, the actual way they presented the election a lot. He's the fact that he's been able to turn vigilantism into this evil thing, has it turned the public's eye away from cheering them
Yeah.
and almost root for him, despite the fact that he's so corrupt and that he's just infusing all this anger and pointing it right back at Daredevil.
I also
And
like
he's
the Spider-Man reference. Yeah.
Yeah, the Spider-Man reference was great too. They implemented the new characters in a way that wasn't like in your face.
Right.
A lot of shows try to do the reinvention or the remakes of a show where they reboot the characters and keep the main cast, but then they introduce a bunch of newbies to kind of take over the plot. The only one that I think is going to sort of take over a bit of the plot is the BB Ulrich lady,
Yeah.
which it makes sense. And the way they're doing it right now with her shooting her little documentary series isn't like in your face about it. It's
Well,
not like really annoying.
Here's the thing. It's not in your face, but I did have that listed as a con because it felt unneeded. A lot of what
So
the people were saying in the interview, yeah, so far, but a lot of what the people were saying in the interview, I didn't feel like needed to be said. It was pretty obvious just if you've seen the show or even were just watching these 2 episodes.
I
But
think that's the only way they could show a character not interacting with Matt Murdock, but and still introduce them.
yeah,
You know, the other ones though, the Heather Glenn character, Kirsten McDuffie, who I think is one of those is the Kirsten McDuffie is the one who's the legal partner who sets him up with Heather. Heather is the therapist, and then of course there's Cherry. All of them, they didn't get in the way.
yeah.
And then there was a lot more lawyering going on, which I preferred than even in Suits LA.
Right, so this seemed like it was kinda going back to the first season. I felt like season 2 and season 3 of Daredevil, they had good parts to it, but they were kind of focused on the action. This was bringing me back to kinda like the bowling episode in episode 3 of season 1 and really focusing on the lawyer, aspect.
And the main case he's taken up is that there's a vigilante, but no one knows he's a vigilante. But he was just out of costume. He saw these 2 guys beating up on someone else in the subway system late at night. He gets in the way. He tries to break it up. And while everything's happening, the guy runs away, the one who was getting beaten up. And one of the people who was doing the beating up runs past him, trips, and falls right into an oncoming subway, dies. The other one ends up being a cop, pulls out a gun, and what do you know? The guy who was trying to be a savior ended up murdering a cop
That was
unintentionally.
Hector, Yaila, right?
Yeah,
He's the
but
white
what's his
tiger?
white tiger?
Yeah.
Yes, and so he ends up getting representation from Matt Murdock, and that's just a pro bono case that Matt Murdock is taking, and he's starting to defend him, and that's when he finds out his secret, which is the fact that he does go out every once in a while and fight crime, and he's able to petition the judge not to use that against him in front of the jury, which was kind of cool.
That
'Cause,
was a
like,
pretty big,
that was a
thing.
pretty big win for him. But you can see why he's personally connected to this case. And you can also see why it's dangerous for him, why he needs that witness so bad. And so at the end of season 2 or episode 2, let's jump there, he finds out exactly where this guy has been staying. At first, I thought he just tracked him down with his ears, which would have been insane. Instead, no, he hangs out outside one of the police uh, uh, goons that he knows the policemen that are going to be told when they figure out, the police squad finds out where the witness is because they're just going to go kill him.
I've always liked how he's been able to kind of tell when he's using his ears and how he's able to pick up on things that other people are using. I even like in episode 2, I think it's around that scene where he's about to get run over by a cop car because he's just so focused
Right.
on following
It wasn't
the
a
guy.
cop car, it was a taxi.
Or sorry, a
'Cause
taxi,
someone just
yes.
jumped into that caddy
Yeah.
and it went away. I liked how way better than what they did with Ben Affleck. Same power, but just a different way of shooting it. And so he follows the code that they hear on the radio transmitter that says, "We got this guy. He's at this apartment." He heads that off. He breaches the apartment beforehand, gets the guy to leave out the window. That's when the 2 cops arrive and they try to start to kill or to try to start to bully him into telling him where the witness has gone. Right?
You knew where it was going,
Right.
though. You knew that like these 2 people were going to get beat up.
We've seen 2 promises. One from Wilson Fisk that he's no longer the kingpin. He's
Right.
given up that. He's going to be a good mayor.
He doesn't like the name.
We've seen him do some pretty shady shit, but like nothing to the same degree as what he was doing in season 1 of the original
Right.
Daredevil. And Matt has made the same agreement, not for they didn't make some sort of pact together, but just an agreement to himself that he wasn't going to start fighting as Daredevil in this world post Foggy. And so when he is put in a situation where it's either death or fight your way
Literally
out,
gun to his head.
yeah,
Yes.
he hears the cops say, "You got to kill this lawyer." That's where he's forced to actually kill them. Were they dead?
I don't
I
remember
mean, he
actually.
smashed that guy's head into the refrigerator so hard, I heard it. I heard it
Oh, yeah,
crash.
no, you saw the blood on the refrigerator. That guy I think is dead. I don't know if he kills the second person though.
But how I mean, they can't really complain too much, can they? They can't say, "Oh, the blind guy beat us up." But who knows where that's going? I just really like that that's how they left the cliffhanger. And what do you think is coming next?
Oh, I don't know. I'm wondering, are we going to see Echo? Because again, I know we're going to see the Punisher. We're probably going to see more of Karen Page, but like, how many people are they going to throw in? Because the thing about Daredevil, why so many people liked it, it's the best MCU show. I think a majority of people believe that, whether you're talking about anything from Disney Plus or Netflix. So I'm wondering how many characters are we going to get? Obviously, there's going to be a fight between Daredevil and Fisk. I hope it comes at the end of the season, but it's also keeping me guessing.
Do you think it's going to be a physical fight or another verbal fight?
I think a physical fight, probably something close to what we've seen in season 3.
That makes sense. Any cons?
Yeah. So again, the beginning scene, the fact that they kept Bullseye alive, I can see why they did, but I wasn't a big fan of
I'll
that.
piggyback. Foggy's death was not my favorite. I know I already pointed that out, but it reminded me like of Scooby Doo at the very beginning of I think the 2002 film or something, where
Yeah,
they were fighting bad guys and then like something went wrong, and all the team had to disband and they broke up, and it was like only Shaggy and Scooby hanging out together. It felt like an excuse to say this is why it's no longer Karen and Foggy and Matt, and why he's going to have to regroup and he's going to be solo, and we're going to be able to introduce a new love interest and all that jazz, you know?
yeah,
Also, whatever happened to his love interest in Elektra? Did she die?
yeah.
She did die?
Yeah,
Okay.
in the Defenders,
All
but
right.
also, kind of, yeah, he also is not in the suit as much. I do kind of wish we saw more of that. A very minor nitpick. I thought that Fisk getting elected in episode 1 happened a little fast. Like, that was, I mean, I know they said that he joined late, but I was not expecting him to actually, like, get elected
The
in the first
pacing of episode
episode.
1 was like, we're going to jump you up to a few or many years after the last thing you saw, and then jump a year after that. And then, yes, speed through Wilson Fisk's election win. The interesting thing about it, I pointed out the election as a pro for me, but it's also a con because I think they were too Fisk is Trump.
Yep.
You know, people ignoring his criminal history, people buying into his rhetoric and tough guy showmanship and image, draining the swamp mentality, others in total shock that the city can be so oblivious. That's where Matt
There's
falls.
literally the line that Charlie Cox says or Daredevil says where he's like, if they elect him, they'll get what they're voting for. I
Right.
think every single Democrat has said that about Trump.
Him surrounding himself with yes men, like that one guy who was just like in love with him, and he's like, yeah, I want more like him on my staff. His marital issues with his wife that doesn't want to make too many public appearances. Hello, Ivanka. Sorry, not Ivanka. And baby Ivanka. Who's it? What's his wife's name?
Yeah, Melania.
Melania. There we
Yeah,
go.
and
Okay.
then I had the BB journalist video on your cuts as also a con, but really it doesn't compare to my pros. I think that the music for the series is top notch. I think that the acting is great. I think that the tone feels exactly like Netflix. I think that if you liked the original Daredevil, you're going to like this. That's why I could even maybe go a little higher, but I'm going to keep it right now, reserve judgment, but give it an 8 out of 10 for the 2 episodes.
Okay, before I get to the reviews, I have two last things about that point about Fisk being Trump that are my cons. This is actually redeeming it because Fisk is a little bit different. He does say that he's a changed man, that he's no longer Kingpin.
Yeah.
And aside from the time that Trump almost like died from getting shot, he's never said that he's a changed human being, you know? It's also, there's a mention that Vanessa, right, that she had an affair. And it took me like, I guess, figuring out. So they mentioned the name Adam, and at first I was like, oh, did she hire Poindexter? Like,
Right.
but that's not his name. His name
Right,
like,
because Kingpin says that he didn't hire
right,
the
exactly.
person
And
to
I
kill
think
Foggy.
yeah. So Adam, I think, is the person that she was having an affair with, but they're using the same name as Frank Underwood's wife's affair dude too. He was also named Adam, so that's
He's
confusing.
getting around.
It's the same guy. This review, it's been universally acclaimed. It has a 9.3 on IMDb right now. When I saw the second episode IMDb score yesterday, it was already over like several hundred reviews, not reviews, but ratings.
Yeah.
And it had 9.8. The audience score is 95%. On Rotten Tomatoes has an 83%. Most every paper that I saw begrudging respect, even if they weren't even big fans of the original. Fisk runs and wins as mayor of New York. Matt gets a girlfriend. He defends the White Tiger. That's basically your recap of what's happened so far. ultimately, you give it an
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. I think it's the best thing that people could have possibly gotten from Disney once it took over.
Yes.
Like, I still think it would have been smarter if they had let Netflix finish the 4 or 5 seasons,
Everyone wanted
then
that. Yeah.
waited like 5 years, brought it back for if this was like chapter 2, you know? It sort of is, but it's not
Yeah,
entirely.
yeah.
Like the first chapter never got to get its full completion like it wanted. But hindsight is 2020. They pivoted when they needed to. Had they released, can you imagine that 18 episode, really slow legal
So
procedural?
I was wondering, I was like, and I don't know if there's anything on it, but like, was Foggy supposed to be in those 7 episodes? Did they just go, you know what, we're focusing too much on this. Let's just like make one excommunicado.
Yeah, I
Like,
think it was just all Foggy's fault, honestly. They were like, this guy does not know how to act. We need to get him off this
I
series.
know.
I don't even know if Karen and Foggy were in the plans originally. I think maybe. But you're saying for the legal drama, I think originally they were trying to reboot it so much that Matt Murdock's character didn't have the same backstory. So I don't
Wow.
even know if
So not even like the wrestler dad or anything like that.
yeah, I think they were going to reinvent some stuff from scratch. And there have been even comments from other MCU people who are like, yeah, they were kind of shooting off the hip from the hip, and then they realized they couldn't do that. And so they decided to return back a little bit to its roots while still retaining a bit of a new identity. And so far, it's worked very well, it seems like.
What would you give it out of 10?
The second episode was really, really good. The ending was. But I would say like an 8.5, probably.
Oh, okay, so you're going
For those
higher.
two.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.